My name is Waylon. I'm the developer of Odd Realm, which is a settlement building survival game set in a procedural world. And today I'm going to describe at a high level the Sacred Scrolls expansion, which came out 100 years ago. I guess it's actually a week ago, but feels like 100 years ago.
So this is our second time talking in a full-length video, and so I'm gonna kind of do this interview with the assumption that everybody listening here has either A, played the game before, or B, watched the previous video that we did. But there will be a link in the description, so if you haven't watched that previous video, or if you haven't played the game, I recommend that you check out the previous video, just to kind of get an idea of what Odd Realm is, what the gameplay options are, and how the game is played. We're going to be talking, like you just said, primarily about the Sacred Scrolls expansion, which came out last week, which is a very long-awaited major patch for the game, with quite a lot of changes. I mean, it kind of feels like playing a whole new game, to put it lightly. So I guess kind of the first real question I have is kind of a big one, which is, what was your main goal when you started working on the Sacred Scrolls expansion for Odd Realm, and what are the main aspects of the game that you were trying to improve?
It's taken a long time for this update to go out. It was like 2 years of work that went into it. 2 years that flew by, but all that time wasn't really intended to pass by. I had started in, I guess, March of 2020. I think the pandemic had sort of just kicked off. I just released the Frozen Frontier update, which was adding the tundra biome as well as some temperature mechanics and a bunch of other things. And so at this point, I had a game that was, I would say, hastily created and had a lot of legacy design issues, not just with the game design, but with the code and how I built the architecture for it. And the problem with these settlement building games is that they are very complicated, and you need to really put a lot of work into the framework so that you can not only have it run and not destroy somebody's computer, but have it be expandable so you can add to it without ever, bumping your head into some under the hood wall. And what happened for me around that time in 2020 was I was starting to work on a bunch of these new features. I can't remember at the time what I was adding, but they were, I would say, superficial, and just the act of trying to add content and little features was quite a headache for me because of the poorly written framework. I kind of made the decision that I was going to, from the ground up, build a lot of things, rebuild a lot of things. And I should say that this is my first game. This is the first game that I've built from the ground up, everything you see. So in the past, I'd worked as a programmer, but I'd only worked on very bespoke things like character movement in the world or something. There was always very specific jobs that I had. And so this was a really big challenge for me. And that's why that first iteration of the game was so, I don't want to say poorly written, but it was almost like a prototype. And I needed to spend time going back, fixing things, making sure things were properly written so that now I don't have to have these things slowing me down. And when you first do it, it seems like you're adding a lot of work unnecessarily, but in the long run, it does work out better. And the main thing that I wanted to add to the game, which I knew I couldn't do unless I rewrote a lot of that core framework, was bigger maps. So the original size of the maps was 128 by 128, and then it was 64 blocks deep. And top of the list feature request was, can you make the maps bigger? So I went and rewrote a lot of that stuff, and now you can have maps that are 4 times bigger. So that's 256 by 256 by 64. And it seems like those are just numbers, but at the end of the day, you're procedurally generating all of this stuff, and you got to load it into memory. And not only that, but these little entities you have to pathfind across all of this terrain, and that's really expensive, especially when you have, some people will have like 100 entities going at once, and there was a lot of challenges there. So in the beginning, that was my goal with the update. It was just to like, let's make a proper game. It's no longer this prototype. We're going to have a serious product here that's going to hopefully compete with other games out there, and I want people to be able to expand on it themselves with mods, and there's no way they could do that unless I did that extra work. So now that this update is out, it feels like I have lifted a weight off my shoulders, because I have all this freedom to add these things that I want now. And like, thank goodness I have such a patient community that waited like 2 years to see an update. I can't believe that, but here we are.
I think it's maybe the remnants of the Dwarf Fortress community, just patience showing through.
Yeah, that's so true.
Because we're kind of in a similar spot. But I mean, it sounds like the time and the effort that you put in has like expanded the possibilities on what you can do with the games. So like these long periods of time between patches, I think maybe is something that I really wish that social media catered to a little bit better, because it really allows for genuine improvements in games. But because of the algorithmic drivenness of Steam and Twitter and social media in general, people forget, and games like that aren't updating frequently. Very quickly, suddenly end up getting called dead, and it's I think it gives me a massive respect for you as well as your community to be able to put that time in and make improvements at such a deep system level to the game, while also developing an indie game. Like that is a very difficult thing to do. So it's kind of a massive achievement. As far as I'm concerned. But the larger maps are definitely a really cool change. But the thing that got me really excited when I was reading your patch notes, because I didn't play much of the beta. I played a little bit of the beta, but enough to just kind of see the new stuff, and then started hitting bugs and went, okay, it's time for me to back out, because I don't need to be archiving bugs on the internet for all eternity.
Yeah.
So the main thing, the first thing here that I really want to talk about is realm persistence, because as somebody who likes Dwarf Fortress, this is something that gets me really excited, because so many other games in especially the colony management space and the world simulation space don't have this. It kind of drives me insane. So could you talk a little bit about what the world persistence allows the player to do at this point, and maybe what you want that to do in the future?
Yes, I am so stoked to talk about this, actually, because it's really cool. And I agree with your sentiment that you don't see this sort of thing very often. And now that you mention it, I'm like, yeah, this is a cool addition to games like Dwarf Fortress and Odd Realm. But yes, one of the things I had to go back and it was a huge rebuilding process, as I said before. But this specifically was a big challenge. And actually, let me just say what it did before. Before, you would settle your tile, and that tile was the world that you saved to. It stored all your uniforms, I don't know, the character settings, everything. There was no concept of a quote-unquote realm. So I went back and I rebuilt everything from the assumption that, okay, you're not starting a tile, you're not starting this like little block world. You're actually starting this huge, sprawling overworld map, which is the realm. And every entity, every item is going to be saved to the realm. Okay, and so there's this umbrella of entities, items that can traverse the tiles within the realm. Now, when you decide to settle a tile, it kind of kicks off a little a sub world where it'll save out sort of position information about this tile and whether or not a certain item is in that tile or an entity. And but it's very much separated. The realm doesn't really care about these tiles, but the tile cares about the realm. So it's not so it's like a one-way direction there. And what is really exciting about this sort of thing for me is that I have the plan to edit these tiles as the player is absent. So I want players, they'll start a new game, and you essentially have nothing. You know, you're just starting with a small group of settlers, and you're starting your first kingdom, essentially. And then the story in the game is that you're kind of coming out of the dark ages of the world, and kingdoms are starting to form again, and this is your chance to start a new kingdom. And you settle your first tile, and what's exciting is that you can decide to leave that tile and go start a new one, and it will save everything off in that old tile. And the intention is you can go back and see that things have changed. Now, right now it is just like a hard save of the state. It's not simulating anything yet, but the plan is you would go back and depending on how much time has passed, things will have changed quite significantly. And one sort of game over, I don't know, feature mechanic that I've been mulling over is that when your tile dies, everybody in the tile dies, a certain amount of time will pass, and it will let you either resettle in the same tile or adjacent tile or whatever, or go to one of the previous tiles you've settled where you left settlers behind. And so there'll still be a certain amount of time that passes because it's like your godly spirit is moving over to the next area, and there has to be some sort of, I don't know, payment for getting everybody killed. But because of this time passing, what's really cool is you would enter this tile, let's say it's the last tile you just played in, and you'll see, you know, your castle, let's say, has been overgrown. It has all these vines growing all over it, and now, I don't know, let's say a horde of Arden, one of the races in the game, they've moved in and taken over, and you know, the shrine that you built is now a like a temple to their god, and you know, you have to deal with that, and hopefully every time you go into these worlds again that you've been in before, you'll recognize the things you've built and see a little bit of, you know, life in the game, because that's what it's supposed to look like, is like growing world. And yeah, I'm really excited about this specific feature. It's part of the whole overworld map list of features that I'm going to be working on, which includes interacting with your neighbors. These are neighboring kingdoms, trading with them, all that stuff, and having this overworld map sort of doing things and you don't even realize.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even in the way it's implemented right now, I was able to settle in a world, go through the tutorial, realize that I didn't understand farming properly and everybody was starving to death, and they're definitely fine. I abandoned and moved elsewhere. And they're still there. I'm sure they're happy. They definitely didn't starve to death, I hope. And I'm now building elsewhere very happy. And it's like already like that is a kind of a fun story narrative that like is able to develop because of the realm persistence and that. And I'm super keen to see how that builds out in the future, and very excited. And it's probably maybe my quick highlight, at least at initial impressions of the patch. But the next kind of thing that you're tackling that's also, in my opinion, equally ambitious and interesting in its own right is money is now a physical item in the world instead of just a like in-menu stat that existed. Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the currency Ren is now, you know, just an item that you find in the world, and it felt very good to add that and make that change. Namely because having just a number on the HUD felt it really took away from the immersion and was so gamey. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of things in Oddrealm that are gamey. There's like a tech tree, for example. But just having this physical item in the world was really interesting to me because the first and foremost, is that you can easily see the wealth of your kingdom. It feels really good when you have a vault underground and there's all this ren lying all over the place, and you're like, yeah, like this is my hoard I've amassed. And it also introduces a fun dynamic of having the potential for entities to show up and want to steal that stuff. Or perhaps one of your settlers decides, hey, we have all this gold. I'm going to pull off a heist and steal it all. And, let's see what the player does. And there's a lot of story that can unfold just from this one thing being a physical item. And, there's a lot of dilemmas that are involved where this is because it's a physical item, you have to have it transported. So you have to think more about, okay, do I have people that can actually be dedicated to moving gold to places? One of the additions in this patch is the vault and the market, and so both of these open up, places where you'll see items when you buy items from the merchant. When you sell items, your ren and merchant items will show up there. And yeah, there's just like a lot of, I don't know, realism. It's a really engaging change, and I think is a precursor to things like having like merchants show up to your town and stick around for a bit. And depending on how nice your market is, maybe you get higher, you get merchants with better stock and more ren on them, so you can sell more. And it just really opens up the doors to what the player can engage with, as opposed to, hey, look, I've got a gold number in the top right that says 50,000. It follows me everywhere. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing for me to look at because this is a feature that was in Dwarf Fortress specifically that was then later removed because they, I think, got a little too crazy with it and it became way too accurate of a simulation of capitalism, and it ended with having a lot of homeless dwarves. But on the flips, which when you read back in time and look at their patch notes, it's actually like some very funny, like classic bugs that came out of that. But coins still exist in the game, but like you can't really do anything with them. You can use them as a bargaining tool, but they're not very helpful in that regard.
Yeah.
And so to me, it makes me really curious to see because you did say the keyword of gamification and mechanic that's kind of gamey. I'm kind of curious to see a more gamey version of that idea, and so just having money as a physical item in the world already is kind of fun because it's like, oh, I need to put this somewhere. But also then beyond that point, it's like it like there are other games in this space that do have active currency that is used. I mean, RimWorld, as an example, has silver that you acquire, and it is goes in a stockpile currency, and it gets given to traders, and you get it from traders. But aside from that, there's no interactions with it. Like, it doesn't do anything aside from that. You can basically use it to pay people off, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see more takes on the idea of having physical money as a player interactable item, which also kind of bounces into another thing that is interesting, which are the tomes that are written as items or as the little characters go around doing things, which are also a physical item in the game, which I think is kind of a similar aspect or idea to a degree there, because they also lean into economy because they're sellable. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The tomes in the game are very experimental with their current implementation because they are very much intertwined with the very gamey progression tree. And um, they, just like Ren, they were added because it just felt really, felt really nice to have this representation of knowledge in your city, and to see your miner, for example, as they're getting better and they're leveling up. Oh, they've written a tome of industry, and then you can use that to unlock um, new blueprints, for example. And I say this is very experimental because it's like so not tuned right now, but I just don't even know how this should be implemented necessarily, because I've never really like encountered this, so I don't have anything to sort of jump off of. But yeah, the main problem with the previous version of Odd Realm was that it was unclear what you could do, and there was no direction for what blueprints you could unlock and how you got things, and that's why I added that saga tree. And initially, the saga tree used also like a very gamey kind of level up point. It's almost like an ability point that you would earn from your settlers leveling up, and you would spend that. And that's fine and dandy, but just like the Ren, it just didn't feel very good to look at a number on your HUD that was like out in the ethos, didn't really have a physical item. And so adding tomes is really cool because, yeah, like you said, you could, if you want, you can just use your tomes as a sellable item, and you can hand them off to merchants, and merchants actually do pay a decent amount for them. Or you can, because they are a physical item, and every physical item in the game can be held by an entity, you can equip the tome to a settler's hand slot, and they'll get an increase to their skills, like they have a reference manual, so to speak. And the intention with this mechanic specifically is that later on it will it won't just be you've got 5 tomes and they're each like assigned to a tree. There will be a progression of tomes that you start to write as your settlement grows, and more importantly, as you are exploring the world. So there's a lot of history in the world that the entities in the world, they don't even know about, and that's the reason why the expansion is called Sacred Scrolls, because the Sacred Scrolls are the only written history from what happened before the Fracture, a big event in the game. So the cool thing about having these physical items, the tomes that you'll write and unlock blueprints, is that I'm also going to have these scrolls and these old artifacts that you can find as you explore the world, which as well, they will unlock abilities for the player that normally you wouldn't have been able to. So exploring dungeons, let's say invading another kingdom and taking their capital. Maybe that capital had a vault with these sacred scrolls, and there's a lot of really nice storytelling potential from these physical items. Again, just like the Ren. And that's the intention that I have as the developers. Like, I'm moving in the direction of, I want players to discover these cool little new, I don't know, like maybe now you can summon some giant creature that does your bidding. Like, I don't want to say a dragon or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There's a lot that can be done there.
I mean, even things like, if I'm selling these scrolls of industry to a certain faction, am I increasing their technology?
Yeah, great point.
There's a lot of weird like things that I was thinking about while I was playing. I'm like, it probably doesn't work this way right now. In fact, I expect it to not. But there's a possibility space there that I think is really interesting, and like you said, I've never seen this mechanic anywhere else. I know games that have books. I know games that you can eat books, and I know games that you can use them as buffs, or like in various other like similar portions of that implementation, but I've never seen the little player characters write books. They're a valuable item that can be stored in a stockpile that can be sold, equipped it as a buff, or used to increase your tech tree. It's a really neat interaction, and I think it's one of the currently very unique and interesting aspects of the game, and I can't wait to see how it
Yeah,
develops.
that's probably the big takeaway from the expansion is this is this, I don't know, like the metaphor is this is the table. Like I've built the table and now we can put dinner on the table because now there's a lot of potential for the game. All these systems are ready to be added to, and that's why I'm stoked for this year because now I'm just working on that stuff. And the cadence for these like expansions is going to be much shorter because it's so much easier to add that stuff.
So during with the release of this patch, another thing that's kind of happened is some mechanical consolidation, and one of those changes that was made is rooms have seen some shuffling around, and specifically stockpiles are now a room type, and zones don't exist anymore. So could we talk a little bit about that and the mechanical changes kind of surrounding rooms?
Yeah. So the zones, yeah, they were like a designation in the world, and if you wanted a resource, quote unquote, stockpile, you would have to place down that resource zone, and that mechanic really hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the how it looks or what button you're pressing to actually still do that. So at its basic utilitarian level, it's the same. And I wanted people to still easily be able to place stockpiles, and that was one thing that people really liked is, you just open up that toolbar menu and, you can get going. The thing that I eventually wanted to add is to have better control over what was going in a stockpile and who was working on the stockpile, and also what priority those stockpiles had. And so in the Sacred Scrolls expansion, you won't see stockpile priorities. You don't see item blacklisting. That's actually, I have that done. It's coming in the next update. But in Sacred Scrolls, what you can do is select a room, which is the stockpile, place it down, and that is essentially creating like an all zone, what it would have been called in the past. But now you can open that up and assign entities to it. Because it is a room, I wanted to have that owner functionality that rooms had on their own. And so it didn't make a lot of sense to write, a brand new owner feature specially for zones. So it just made a lot of sense to say, okay, well, let's just make stockpiles a room type, and it's still, you can still designate it, you can still edit all the items. Really, it's got the same functionality, and so that made a lot of sense to kind of shift it into that. And the nice thing is, because it's a room and it interacts, it works exactly the same as any other room, you can have stockpiles in any room now. So if you place your vault, you will see that it comes with the default stockpile of Ren. It just says, oh, bring Ren here, because I just assume the player wants that. And then the same, this is a change coming, but the same goes for places like the kitchen. It's like it'll have a default stockpile with raw food, cooked food, and like remains. So the intention in the beginning was just to make the zones to have more control with your zones, rather than just some paint tool that at a high level really didn't do a whole lot. So yeah, now you can mix and match items to your heart's content. I've got the new blacklisting thing, so you can say bring resources here excluding, let's say, wood logs. And now they also have priorities. So when you place let's say, an animal enclosure and a stockpile, you can have the animal enclosure's priority raised so that anything in that stockpile, the shepherds or anybody with the carry skill will bring the required items. So let's say animal fodder would be one. They'll make sure that animal fodder is brought to this room rather than it just sticking around in the stockpile. It's a way more flexible system.
Yeah, it's nice to see that system kind of get a rework, and it's also nice to just have less menus in the game because like I don't think it's been mentioned in this recording yet, but there has been like kind of a large portion of the UI has been redone as part of this
I
update.
think everything,
So
literally every single element.
new, right? So it's nice to like not have a zones button anymore and just have like the rooms button. But like I think I did mention it earlier in this is somewhere that it kind of feels like it's a whole new game at this point, and it's really interesting seeing the directions that the game has been going. Considering like now you can just like float on a raft in the middle of the ocean for some reason. Like where did that one come from?
Yeah, a lot of features in this update are a result of me getting bored. So one thing I do to stay sane, and at the cost of increasing dev timelines, but I'll see. Yeah, I had just added swimming to the game. So before, I don't know if you remember, water was essentially lava, and
It was instant
yeah,
death.
anything that fell into water was pretty much destroyed. Items, whatever. Um, and I had just made it so that you could enter water. There was like now swimming animation for all the entities, and they interact with everything. Items can go in, etc., etc. And I didn't even anticipate this, but I thought as I was playing, testing out the new ocean biome, just to make sure it was loading properly, I would spawn my little settlers, and they would just be there in the ocean. And I thought, okay, how cool would it be as a player or a streamer to just challenge yourself and do I'm going to survive out in the ocean. I have just the supplies I take with me, and let's see what can happen. So I just have this code in there that spawns a raft if you want to spawn on the water, so that you at least have somewhere to start and have your items spawn. And it's nothing. There's no like grand scheme behind it. It was just like one of those. It was a Saturday, and I thought, oh, it'd be cool to have a raft come along on the journey.
But like, is it possible to like achieve the same level of? Because I've messed with it a little bit settling on a raft, and I'm just curious if it's possible to end with like essentially Odd Realm Waterworld, or is it much more of kind of a scrappy survive until you starve to death situation?
Hopefully, Waterworld. I think right now you have to do some things with a custom start in order to really get it going, because the default, the easy starting loadout, doesn't give you dirt, and so you either have to, I guess you could dig down and hopefully you have some dirt you find, but if you start out and there's no dirt at all, you're kind of effed because you have nothing to grow on. However, you could also try and build like a fishing rod, or tame some animals. There are a couple ways to survive with that start, but I have plans to add. This is not my idea. This is an idea from somebody in the community, which I thought was great. They mentioned having like debris and flotsam kind of appear. So as you're on your raft, you can have resources show up, or maybe there's some already on the map. As well, I'm going to add very soon a lot of underwater plants and resources, so that you'll see, I don't know, clamshells, seaweed, coral reefs, stuff like that, and you'll be able to interact with those and survive using them. But yeah, right now it's like quite difficult. You could also try to mine underground and have like a little underground mushroom farm. There are a couple ways you could do it. It's not easy.
Odd Realm, the game that has a extra game inside of it that you decided to make out a weekend. I kind of love it. Just kind of that little aside thing there. A lot of weapons have been added to the game. But alongside of the weapons, you also talk a little bit about walls being a little bit different, and the little characters not being able to climb double high walls, so that you can actually have like a fort, and it is easier to defend than previously, where they would just climb up the sheer cliff face and climb back in. I'm curious if this is like caused any additional pathing problems for you on the development side of things, because this is the first since this patch is the first time I've actually had like people starve to death because I got stuck in places because I couldn't climb out of things due to this change. So I'm just kind of curious about how you're handling it from that point.
Yeah, there is a learning curve there where it's very easy to build your settlers into a corner. And that's actually a problem that's been in the game since even before that. I don't know if you've ever tried to like fill in a mine or something. Because they use like the algorithm that they use for pathfinding, it tries to be as efficient as possible. And especially when you're prioritizing lots of jobs, it tries to find the one that makes the most sense relative to the position of your entity. So it will look at things like, are you below it? Are you above it? Like where does it make sense to start building from? But if you also want the computer to be like, yeah, you're actually going to dig yourself into, or, bury yourself alive here, like that's a way more complicated, expensive algorithm that you need to write. And that's the only reason why I haven't added that, because it's just, I don't know, it's one of those trade-offs. Like, do I want a fast game where like the entities actually don't have to sit there thinking about what they need to do, or do I want that and potentially save their lives? So I'm not really sure where I am going to go with that yet. That's a problem I have on my list of to-dos to like help fix, but there are some things I've been thinking about adding. One of the ideas is like scaffolding. So when you're building, maybe they place the scaffolding so that it's something that actually disappears after a period of time. There are a lot of like problems to solve with that too. Yeah.
Such as game dev.
Yeah, it's that's the problem with this type of game, is there's so many things that can go wrong, and
Yeah.
you can as a developer, you can make it's so easy to put players in a position where they're frustrated.
Yeah. I think that it's also kind of interesting because Z levels are such a wanted mechanic from a lot of players in games in general. Like whenever I'm playing a new colony management game, the first question is always, is there Z levels?
Right.
And the vast majority of the time, the answer is no. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It took you 2 years to put out this patch, right? The complexity of the game is just exponential the second you allow things to go up and down. And so it's like it comes with the territory. And for me, as somebody who's experienced with these types of games, and also this helps the game currently. The game's kind of forgiving at this point.
Yeah.
So like, if 4 people get stuck somewhere and they die, like that happened to me on stream a couple days ago when I was streaming this, and essentially what ended up happening was those people repopulated in about 30 minutes. Like it wasn't really a huge issue. So like there is less of a problem with frustrations there, I think, just because the game is kind of forgiving. But that just comes with time, I think.
Yes,
there will improve.
With this sort of problem, there's no one fix, that you just add something and it's like, oh, this works perfectly. It's actually, oh, I need to add 50 little things that ease the pain slowly. And like you said, it takes time to add all those. And yeah, we'll get there. It's just there's so many edge cases that you have to find. That's the hard part, is finding them. And thank God there are so many players that help me with that, because if I was on my own, I'd never be able to find, like, oh, when I built a thatch roof on a tree, for some reason the pathfinding got totally messed up in that specific case. It's like, oh, okay, it was because, I don't know, like the thatch, it only blocks pathing for inorganic. I don't, I'm making stuff up here, but that is the type of problem I come up across now, rather than pathing doesn't work up and down. It's like, it's never cut and dry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, I mean, probably something that I give more leeway to because of my experience with these types of games, but also I see people who don't normally play these types of games playing Odd Realm and not immediately getting frustrated. And I think that that's, again, kind of an achievement in and of itself. But on the topic of achievements, you rebuilt your entire UI, and this is too big of a subject for one video. So I'm just going to kind of ask the simple question. What was your goal when remaking the UI based on what you'd learned in the past?
Well, the thing that sucks with system-heavy games is that everything needs a screen, and it needs a really robust, like, complicated screen. And you don't want the player to think it's complicated. You just want it to be complicated so that it can provide a lot of tools. And so the more I was adding with specifically the individual entities and what they could do, the more complicated the UI got. And the thing about having all these screens, so I think Odd Realm has, I don't know, like 15 pretty serious screens, 10 to 15. And as soon as you change one design, you have to change it for everything else. And it just takes so much time to do all that. And I had learned a lot with the previous version of Odd Realm in terms of UI design. And don't get me wrong, this is by far one of my weaknesses, is UI design. It's so difficult. I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I did learn a lot. And the previous version had a lot of very inconsistent design. So you would go from one screen and it would have a completely different look and feel than another screen. And so my first goal with the UI rework was like unifying the language that I'm using, and like where buttons are, and how do I train the player like where to look when they first open the screen. All those problems are really difficult, and I'm still doing a lot of work on that stuff. It just takes forever. But things like dragging a window seems really trivial, but then you have to think about things like, if you change a resolution, how does that save the position of the window, and can the players reset it, and how are they dragging the window? How do you communicate that a window can be dragged? And so the Sacred Scrolls patch was all about the quality of life for the player using these windows, and just trying to make it easier. And by far, one of the complaints I had with the previous version was just like the contrast. So all the windows were very much a similar brown, and the text was like a light brown on a somewhat darker brown, and it was very difficult for most people to see, but especially anybody that had any visibility issues. So going through every screen and increasing the contrast was a big priority of mine. And yeah, that's why when you look at every window, it's like a completely different look because I had to just go and make all the contrast different, and all the buttons had to have the same language and everything. And man, I could go on for days. Like it's such a big,
Yeah.
colossal task going through everything.
Maybe we'll make that video after the game's finished.
Well, the thing is, like,
But
I'm certain the UI will continue to evolve. It's just how could
yeah.
it not? It's one of those things that can continually improve. I think the UI in Odd Realm is mediocre, and so there's still a lot to work on. And I'm sure you and I will sit down and we'll talk and it'll be like, oh yeah, I had to redo everything again. It's just like that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. I mean, massive respect for doing it though. I mean, like I've played games throughout that have been through various forms of early access that just end up having menus tacked in, and like the UI just slowly becomes more and more and more jumbled. Like, not to knock anybody else's games down a peg, but there's a few of them out there that like just kind of add menus as time goes on. I mean, because we reference it a lot, but like even like Dwarf Fortress legendarily has this problem, which is why like the military screen is so strange, is because it was made like 6 years after the rest of the UI, and like it has a completely different design ethos to the rest of the UI in that game, which is why that whole thing is getting a UI.
Yeah, and it's so easy to forget those things that you've learned. That's why it's really important to just like almost have a style guide written off somewhere to help influence the future you. Because yeah, you can easily, for example, and this is so trivial, but it's like, what is the buffer from the border of your windows? It's like you want to make sure that everything has the same look so that when players open a new screen, it's not like their brain has to totally reset and it's like, wait, what am I looking at again? Like you don't want to jar people, right? And I totally understand the Dwarf Fortress issue with the military screen. I'm actually shaking in my boots because I do have plans to add different languages to the game, and I've always said, because my first programming experience was as a UI programmer, and I had to do a lot of localization stuff, so I know what it's going to take, and I am very nervous because so many things need to resize dynamically when you have different languages. It's going to be interesting. I think I'm gonna have to concede my own game's font and try and use something that's just not that pixel art look, so that I can fit more text in.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean that there's like that the discussion of translating games is something that I feel like I talk with every dev about. It's almost every conversation I've had with anybody who's working on any game is always just the subject of translating it into other languages comes up, and it's just this oh no, which I completely understand. I mean, some people go the routes of just outsourcing it, and then you just end up with terrible translations. Like all of RimWorld's translations are outsourced to the community, and like I can't read Finnish, but apparently the Finnish translation of RimWorld is absolutely hilarious.
oh no, okay,
And very
cool.
poorly done, because they're all just outsourced to community members, right? So like there are good translations for that game in certain languages, and there are ones that are basically just Google translated.
Yeah,
And
yeah, no, I think I'm gonna have to also, do community volunteer stuff because it's so expensive to hire translators.
yes, yes. Good localization is a full-time job along with good UX design.
Yeah,
So,
I not to throw shade at RimWorld or anything like that, but I'm surprised that RimWorld is community driven with the localization because they've done really well, and I think they could afford to hire translators. So I'm surprised that they wouldn't do that. If Oddrealm was doing as well as RimWorld, I would hire translators for sure.
well, Noted. So once you've sold a couple million copies,
Fingers crossed.
Hold you up.
Yeah,
to that.
okay, deal.
Fingers crossed, of course. But honestly, like, just at the end of the day, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me on these. Like, this is kind of the thing that keeps my channel going at this point, especially on YouTube, is developers lending me their time so that I can make videos out of them. There was also a segment on the Halcyon Frequency podcast that you guested on briefly, which if anybody's just finished making it to the end of this video, you can go give that a listen, which is down in the description as well. And if you, now's your chance to have the floor. Where can people find you? Where can people support the game and your work? And where can people buy Oddrealm?
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I do want to say quickly that it's a symbiotic relationship where this game wouldn't exist without people like you. And honestly, it's only going because people stream it and talk about it. So huge thank you to you. And if anybody wants to check out Oddrealm, it's on itch, it's on Steam, and it's on GOG. However, GOG only has the Windows version right now. And yeah, you can follow development if you're on Twitter. You can just look up mine first and last name, which is Waylon Snedker, WaylonSnedker is my Twitter handle. And I post everything there, so if you want to follow, you can do that.
And of course, all of the links will be in the description of this video, as well as to the, should I call it part one? I don't know, the last one that we did, talking about the game just kind of as a whole, less specifically about a specific patch. But hopefully you'll join me again in the future when another major update happens or when you leave early access.
I hope so.
Yeah, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
And this is where we say goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.